All right, we are cooking. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. We are excited to have our monthly Service Fabric call. So thank you to the Service Fabric team for being here today and joining us every month to provide these updates and answer community questions. As a friendly reminder, we are recording the call. So if you have any, if you have to jump off early or you want to revisit the content, I'll have this available in the ACP as soon as it's available to me and stream to upload. And I'll keep an eye on the chat. I know there's members from the Service Fabric team here to do that as well. And I think those are all of my reminders. So with that, I'll hand it over to Peter and the team.
Thanks, Steph. So we have Nandini from the Service Fabric team with us as well. And we also have Whit that will be giving an awesome presentation on some of the workloads he's been running on Service Fabric. So we're very excited to have him presenting today. Thank you so much, Whit, for joining us. And I think we're just going to start off with it. So if you don't mind, Whit, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Let's figure out how to share this real fast.
Whit, you're making your rounds with the Azure team. I just got a ton of positive on you from the Azure Communication Services team yesterday.
We use a lot of different Azure tools, so definitely get around and talk with a lot of teams.
Good.
Okay, great. Well, just wanted to thank the team for letting me present today. Wanted to just kind of give a quick look at how it is that my company Innovian is using Service Fabric, and kind of look at some of the workload scenarios that we're using. I'll kind of look at kind of walk through three of the big ways in which we're using Service Fabric, and kind of conclude with a overview of what I really enjoy about this platform, and just kind of go from there. I guess I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I prefer to answer any questions at the end in order to best respect everyone's time, since I've got a fair amount of material and a fairly small window to present it all. Okay, great. Innovian, I am the CEO, Chief Architect, Lead Developer. As Steph mentioned, wear many hats. I interact with a lot of different Azure tools. We're a small but fully remote company. We've got employees around the world. We are a technical consultancy predominantly focused on marketing technologies, but we've also done some custom software development as well. Later this year, we'll be releasing our flagship product, Empirica. What is that? Put simply, data provides the empirical backbone for accurately analyzing visitor behavior, confidently making database decisions, driving targeted messaging at individual or microsegment levels, and more. But can you trust the data that you're collecting? There exists no really effective way to audit every call that's made from a website to every vendor from every visitor. Issues can be transient, particular to very specific configurations, regions, clients, devices. And because of the manual nature in which organizations typically perform quality assurance of data collection efforts, only the biggest issues are, occasionally spotted. Existing marketplace solutions provide a snapshot of your data quality at some single point in time, usually through some kind of a bot-driven framework, and they do really nothing to address the dynamic nature of this problem. So Empirica is the answer to this. So it's installed to your website with a single line of JavaScript. Our recently patented product observes and validates every request from every visitor to every endpoint. 100% test coverage with a single line of code, with mere seconds passing before a notification is dispatched to subscribed parties, detailing any observed issues. So we save you time and money by reducing your quality assurance footprint while simultaneously improving your data quality. So if please feel free to register at our website for any product updates or send me an email. I'd be delighted to follow up with you about this. We're looking to release this sometime in the second half of this year. So this tool, it processes a lot of data. We can kind of look at some of the different scenarios in which we're using Service Fabric for this. Probably the one of the really helpful ones has been secret management. We originally needed a mechanism to handle credential rotation for our various service principals, but we later expanded this, since it just does regular effort, to also handle certificate renewals and handle deployment of those certificates, both across Service Fabric itself and our larger Azure service footprint. So we use Let's Encrypt as our certificate provider. Their certificates expire every 90 days, so that makes manual renewal trialing. So instead, we have a website, a stateless website host running Blazor. You specify the domain name, the various targets that the certificate's deployed to. We save each domain to a reliable actor and set a reminder for 75 days out. It gives us 2 weeks in case something goes wrong to manually fix it. We register the domain verify it via Azure DNS. The certificate and the secret are saved to a key vault. A reference to that saved in the virtual actor alongside renewal history, and then apply the updates regularly. We don't have to really do anything about it as people add domains. It just creates new virtual actors for it. Updates are applied to each of the registered targets. Emails are sent for runtime failures, and we have just the simple management website to kind of list what domains have been provisioned and to otherwise kind of manage that. And while Managed Service Fabric removes the need for swapping out the primary cluster certificate, to my knowledge, we're still responsible for updating the reverse proxy and application certificates for now. But we also have just other deployments endpoints that we have to deploy to as well. App Gateway probably being the biggest one. But also app services and, of course, anything that has to be deployed directly to the VM scale sets. So anyway, so secret management. We also, because our system is dealing with the ingress of data from various websites, we anticipate requiring the throughput of a significant amount of data ingestion. So this grows with every customer, every property that we add. So we needed some way of ensuring high availability data collection and being able to shuffle it where we needed to for downstream processing. We initially actually considered using Azure Event Hub for this, but over the course of our evaluation, we ultimately decided it made more sense to create our own take on this for several reasons. First, our bandwidth estimates indicated that we'd be hitting throughput limitations quickly on those lower tiers, in addition to having to pay for capture on every one of those instances. Premium and dedicated have significantly higher throughput capabilities, but they also come at the cost, at a cost premium, and we simply didn't need a lot of the other perks that came with those tiers. We'd also have to look at, how do we apply customers, potentially have customers sit at different pricing tiers based on their own throughput needs, or having some kind of a way to aggregate everyone and split that data out later. And so between the logistics of figuring out where our customers' data went to which event hub, paying for them per instance, and those inherent costs in both development time and monetary spend, we decided to see if we couldn't just build our own approach. There were a lot of things we just didn't need in Event Hub. We don't need integration with Kafka. We don't need long data retention. We don't need large numbers of consumer groups or even consistent event ordering. We just needed reliable ingestion, filtering, and export to Azure Data Lake storage for our cold path processing through Databricks, and to other internal services for hot path micro batch processing with Trill, which kind of gives us real-time alerting and aggregate summarization. So I'll cover a little bit more of it on the next slide, but because it's very simple to create separate applications in Service Fabric, we were trivially able to deploy new instances of this application for every customer that we have, and then further utilize Service Fabric's auto-scaling functionality to dynamically size these deployments to meet our ongoing needs. Kind of leaving us with only having to scale out the various VMs atop which Service Fabric is running to meet load requirements. We've also been experimenting with dynamic repartitioning to handle gradual load increases within each of these services. We can try and find a good balance to simply scaling them out versus just adding more instances. Let's see here. So Service Fabric offers the trivial multi-tenant application hosting. It's a lot easier to think through an application that only a single customer uses. Service Fabric enables us to trivially launch and manage those single customer applications via nothing more than a few SDK calls and some API calls out to Azure components like App Gateway, DNS, app registration. Upgrades are easy enough. Really the only thing you have to keep in mind is how do you handle versioning. There's no special work needed for state management across applications. Backups are easily triggered within the service for incremental or full backups. And upgrades are simple, because the upgrades and deployments both feature health checks upon load. We can comfortably deploy a variety of other services, enjoying this very easy high availability, granted across a single region for now, and reliability for our websites, backend processing services, and these numerous ingress endpoints. So we can further optimize for security by utilizing placement constraints and providing custom metrics to the resource manager, so we can best optimize our load distribution and really saturate all the nodes that we're running on. We've also been, because of the ease of deploying different versions for each of these services, we've also been experimenting with a automated ring-based deployment as well. I guess not unlike what Microsoft does. Okay, so that's kind of where everything I have for our workload itself. But I thought I'd take a moment to talk through each of the paradigms, what I really like about them, and features that I'd like to see. Reliable actors, that's easy enough to model them. Very versatile IDs, strings, longs, and GUIDs, kind of cover everything that we need. It's easy to store a state. You specify the type, and that's consistently used throughout the service. And great resource utilization. Since they're virtual, the idle actors aren't really putting any load on the cluster. Save their state and load them whenever they're next accessed. Things I'd like to see in actors is some kind of a query model. So right now, you have to maintain an additional stateful service in order to handle any of your own indexing and to avoid running queries against all the actors. I'd like to see built-in PubSub. A different group called SoCreate offers a PubSub implementation, but I guess a previous community call kind of covered that tool, so I won't really dive into that. But it'd be nice to have a native model for the same, and streaming operations. So right now, operations and service require getting a reference to the service via factory and then executing a method call. It'd be nice to be able to leave a method open that could simply subscribe to data coming from somewhere and then process it reactively without some intermediary regularly pushing specifically to that service, especially because of the concurrency limitations of actors. So something where it could essentially just listen itself would be really useful. Reliable services, again, a very simple state storage model. We don't really have to worry about where the state is stored or even handle replication. It's just done by just committing the transaction. Backups are easily implemented. Optimized service placement keeps our costs minimized while kind of keeping us from having to provision VM scale sets that are simply unnecessary, and they're flexible. I mean, actors themselves were built atop reliable services. Things that I'd like to see. Right now, there's no kind of reliable bag or collection or list, which makes storing any kind of a list of data kind of unwieldy. There aren't any reliable wrappers for single objects, so you wind up kind of misusing dictionaries to solve this, which isn't really optimal. Remoting is difficult, not great for a multi-tenant application like ours, because there are so many different application names. You have to know where it is up front, which makes sense. We've created a variation of SoCreate's locator approach that will open source as soon as I've got some free time on that. that kind of simplifies the service lookup given partial application name matches and service types. Generics aren't supported. You wind up with a lot of repeated methods for every concrete implementation, and partitioning requires some thinking about. If you're using actors, you simply say, hey, here's the ID of the actor I want to access, and partitioning is abstracted away. If you partition data in SQL, you can know how it's partitioned, but you don't really have to think about how to access it after the fact. Unfortunately, Service Fabric services just don't do any of that hand-holding for you. So you'd have to think a little bit about it. So in review, what do I love about Service Fabric as a whole? Easy, high availability between availability zones, and who knows, maybe we'll have official cross-regional support one day. Upgrades are easy. You have to handle state versioning, otherwise roll forward and back is handled for you. The configuration is amazing. Able to modify at the application or service levels. Overrides eliminate need for any kind of development only routines and allow the environment to simply dictate, here are the values that you use for each of those different deployment locations. Deployments are easy. Again, you can design around the idea of a single tenant and then simply deploy different named instances of that with a few commands against Fabric Client. You can because you can manage the cluster internally, you can eliminate the need for a lot of complex external scripting and management in CI/CD pipelines, and it's got some great integrations across Azure. API management, Key Vaults, Active Directory Identity, MSI. Very very adaptable. Things I look forward to, richer monitoring. I'd like to see, just as .NET and Application Insights are both embracing open telemetry, I'd like to see more built-in support for that, even if it's even just facilitated in the service generation templates. Something that can trivially enable some kind of service-to-service tracing to whatever monitoring tool you're using. Zipkin, Jaeger, Application Insights, whatever. On GitHub, a user named, I don't know how you say it, Loic D. I don't know. He maintains a servicefabric.mox library that really facilitates unit testing of services and actors. Usually runs a version behind for a little while, and it's not fully complete. So even if an official mocking package weren't available, just modifying Service Fabric to make it more easily tested would be great. Have Fabric Client implement a public interface. I won't beat the dead horse about generic host. There's a long-running GitHub issue about that. Communication. I like to see support for generics, streaming methods. I like to see richer actor functionality, automated indexing, more efficient querying across different actors, and automatic retries. We frequently run into problems with getting locks on our various reliable collections. So we use Poly to handle retries, but this just adds a lot of boilerplate across the board, both in the calling and the invoke services. But anyway, we're working on some internal tools for some of these ourselves, and eager to share more once we've got them in a better state. But that concludes my presentation about how Empirica has implemented a top Service Fabric. Again, thank you to the Service Fabric team for the opportunity to present today. If you'd like to learn more about Empirica or just want to reach out, please don't hesitate to send me an email. And on that note, I'd like to open the floor to any questions. I guess feel free to come off mute or share, your thoughts in the chat.
Did I hear you say that each customer is basically dynamically deploying a new application to your cluster?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Do you keep like a repository of the deployed applications?
The applications themselves. So when they deploy to Service Fabric, it deploys the application types, and I've got a stateful service that essentially is a stable of those types. So it's keeping track of, as there are new versions available, using the query manager to identify those, and then deploying those, as a new customer is provisioned, deploy another application for that customer with all the required dependencies. Register whatever DNS is required, register it in the app gateway so that inbound stuff is handled. All that sort of stuff. Set up Azure Active Directory app registration. So so all that is just kind of managed by several other services.
Gotcha. Sweet. Thanks.
Yeah. I see Matthew has his hand raised.
Two questions, if I can manage them. Number one, how did you come to land on Service Fabric for meeting the needs for the architecture you guys decided on? And number two is not sure exactly how your org set up. How are you finding Service Fabric for the just kind of the ongoing maintenance and operation side? Are your devs very much in the DevOps where like everybody like really understands Service Fabric and the programming model and all that, or is it more devs do it and then you've got some other people to kind of keep it going and troubleshoot and all that
Sure.
kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I guess originally our whole stack is .NET. So originally found Service Fabric while trying to find. I guess I originally found Service Fabric 4, 5, 6 years ago. It was probably right after they initially publicly released. And I was looking for something that I could use that would give me high availability for deployed .NET applications that was a little bit more granular than what Azure App Services offered. At the time, background jobs weren't very well supported, and I needed something that would be able to do, per tenant, deployments of stuff, in addition to background processing and whatnot, ideally within one solution instead of having several different solutions that different languages, different platforms, and try and glue the whole thing back together. So as much as I can do in .NET, that simplifies a lot, right? So Service Fabric was great just because it offered that native accessibility right off the bat, and so just I guess soon after that, Kubernetes showed up. So I guess Kubernetes was just kind of too late to the game for us. Where pretty much everything that we need is easily offered by Service Fabric. We're switching to running it entirely off of Linux now, simply so that we can utilize it to your second question. So we can utilize it for deploying Docker containers. So those, when we do need additional third-party tools, more often than not, they are containerized for Linux, not for Windows. And so we haven't had a real need to spin up anything different that we can't just get through a managed service on Azure. But switching to a Linux base, lowers our licensing costs on the VMs themselves, and will also, mean that if we do need to host something in Docker, we can. I think did that answer all of your second question?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Yeah, Carl.
Hey, Whit. I just
Hi.
had a question about API management. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you expose an API without really exposing your entire cluster to the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we ultimately discontinued our use of API management. So while I can tell you how we used to do it, we used to essentially have multiple sets of APIs. We'd have a public-facing API, and then internally we use service remoting, so that only those things that the public should be able to see were accessible over any API endpoints. Beyond that, we use Swagger to generate the definition. The API management REST API is part of our CI/CD deployment, and could update that for every new version that we published. We discontinued the use of API management mainly because of cost. So I regularly chat with or share my thoughts in that Yammer group. But yeah, it was too expensive for us. We needed the virtual network integration, and that is only available as part of the premium offering, and we couldn't justify $3,000 a month just for that one functionality.
And do you have a reverse proxy or anything like that?
Yeah. So we use something that's currently in a preview, but a project Microsoft's working on called YARP, I think, YARP. They call it something better than that now. I think it's just the Microsoft Reverse Proxy. But it has a built-in integration for Service Fabric as of preview number 8. It doesn't, if I recall correctly on a note I saw last week, version 1.0 will not have official support for Service Fabric, but it is available as part of those preview builds. Pretty easy to set up. It's you specify as part of the services that need to be exposed to anything external. Simply put a couple keys in the service manifest for those services, and as part of the launch, you create you instantiate YARP itself inside of a stateless API, a stateless web project. And it will go and again, kind of using the query manager, will iterate through all the different services that are installed to your cluster, kind of cache them all and keep track of which of those expose the keys that you've registered to essentially say this should be visible to YARP, meaning that as you add or remove services, it is keeping its own state up to date. And so as you don't necessarily have any problems of, App Gateway itself is not familiar with the various services that you have. You have to use static ports so it can find those services. But you have, kind of the benefits of reverse proxy without having to use reverse proxy.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay, cool. Well, again, feel free to send me an email if you just want to chat about all things Service Fabric, but or anything else if you want to learn more about our products. And yeah, it'd be great to just chat with you. Thank you.
Nice job, Whit.
I guess I'll free the floor back to the Service Fabric team.
Hey, Whit, so thank you very much again.
Of course.
All right. Matt or Peter, do you have anything else on the agenda that you wanted to cover today?
This is Mike. I'll just piggyback real quick on the comment, because this is there's a lot of confusion spinning up already around this, and I want to hopefully close a little bit here. But Whit talked briefly about the YARP, and there was a mention and some release notes and I don't have it up in front of me. But anyways, we are still working with the YARP team, and we're hoping to have a actual brand new repo that will be a fork off of the YARP repo. So we're still working, I guess I'll say it this way. We're still working to have a solution with YARP and SF available for the community. And we're looking at also integrating that into the product, as I mentioned before. So that's still in process. There was a little bit of confusion spun up by a comment, as Whit mentioned. So we'll share more there, hopefully, obviously as soon as we can, but definitely by hope, really cross my fingers by the next community call. So. Other than that, I think we don't have anything else formal to share, so we can open it up for Q&A. Unless Matthew, anything else? Probably not. You're still there. I can't see all the people on here.
Q&A is
Yeah.
good.
Awesome. And I know Peter is having to drop. Let's see. Are there any questions that you have for the team? We do still have Matt and Mike here. Okay, Chris asks, availability zone support in Service Fabric.
Can you expand on that, Chris? What do you mean?
Yeah, I'm getting questions from our management of if we have a virtual machine scale set for a node type, how can we span that across availability zones? And I saw a link, here, I'll put the link in the chat, that it's in preview. And I was just curious what the status is.
So the status for that is accurate. It's still in preview for zone span cluster. We still anticipate this going, we're hoping it goes GA in the next few months, I'll say. Semesters don't mean much to you. So it won't be really soon. You're third party, right? You're external?
External.
So, okay. I will say, I'll put it this way, we do have productionalized customers using this today. It is very solid, but it is not GA. So if you want to reach out to me with specific concerns, if you want to start a thread, I can put I'm just mike.craft at microsoft.com, and I'd love to have a conversation with you, see if we can unblock you there, because we do want to take more customers here and make sure we're not missing anything right before we go GA. So love to have a conversation with you there. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Yep. Otherwise, you can fall back to the other method, which is still documented too. It's just not preferred, right? So it's not as simple. So.
Okay, sounds good.
And I will call out, since we just launched SFMC, the managed cluster product, we do support zone span clusters at SFMC fully GA, if that's an option for you.
Right now, I looked at moving the managed clusters, and we've got so many customizations that it's not feasible right now.
Okay, fair enough. Juho, yes, that is on our roadmap, I'll say verbally. We have high confidence we can deliver that within the next few months. So, Juho asked, because the chat's not saved in the video, still hoping to have cross AZ clusters with less than 15 nodes. So. And I believe I'll call this out because I'm not sure if you saw this, Juho, just to finish it. I'll put a link in chat. I believe we added a note to this effect. So we're to call out exactly what we're doing. We're trying to be a little clearer about that. I know it's not a centralized roadmap, but at least it's notes in line. No problem.
Whit has a question. When creating a new Service Fabric application and creating the initial service, there's a new checkbox for optimize project layout for ARM deployment, but I can't check it to see what it does. Can you detail what it does?
Unfortunately, it points to the very unhelpful this page, which doesn't talk about it.
I'm not familiar with that one. Are you, Matthew, by chance? If you can hear me.
No, feels like something the tools guys snuck in on us. I don't know what that one is.
I don't know if you can see the little screenshot, but I just took a little screenshot of the bottom of it. As far as I can tell, it only shows up if you created a brand new SF application.
we'll have to follow up on that one with. That's a very interesting catch. Okay.
Any other questions for the team?
I guess I'll jump in with another one real fast since.
I just realized I'm on mute. That's helpful. So I was saying I think that box might be so strangely worded, but that might be part of how you opt into startup services versus default services for the local tooling.
Kind of weird that you can't check it though.
Yeah, strange. We will follow up.
Cool.
That's about the only thing I could think that would refer to.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it referred to some larger thing or what else is happening there.
Is there documentation out there on how to not use default services? I've looked, I haven't been able to find anything. I think you said what, startup services is the alternate mechanism?
Yes, there should be docs on it. It went out, I think, in 8.0. So if you look in the release notes for 8.0, I believe that there's a reference to the new mechanism, or if you just search Service Fabric Startup Services, you should land there.
Thanks.
And if you don't, then we have some SEO to go do.
Well, I guess I got another question then. I got a bit of a long-running support ticket on it, but it's haven't heard back, so I thought I'd see if anyone had any thoughts offhand on this call. When using service remoting, you're able to send a request inbound to any class that is implementing stateless service, stateful service, whatever. In a API project, that says that if you send a message via remoting to one of the web projects, it can handle it at the base level. Can you think of any mechanism by which you can then take that and push that into the loaded ASP.NET instance? Because I guess I haven't figured out how, if ASP.NET is loaded on the service level, but then the service level it receives messages, how do you send them into the already loaded ASP.NET instance?
I don't think we've fully understood why your repro doesn't work currently. With I also was looking through it, and remoting relies on this sort of convention where it's looking for the iService, something derived, something that implements that. And I didn't see that in your project.
It would have been an interface project.
I
tend to just put that as a separate thing so that anyone can just consume that project.
I see. So my sense is that there's something going wrong where whatever that interface is not exposed somehow, but we haven't fully figured it out yet. I would expect normal dependency injection in ASP.NET to be able to handle this, where you would have some class that implemented the remoting interfaces, and then you could inject that into whatever you wanted. But we're still looking at it, and your repo is helpful and instructive in us figuring out what's going on there. I feel like I've written Blazor services before that, just work. The interesting thing is that I don't honestly know of anybody else who's ever tried to hook up remoting to an ASP.NET service. Normally, when people write ASP.NET services, they're specifically there to only receive traffic over HTTP.
Sure.
So it's just a combo, and Blazor itself is, to me and to several others, still quote unquote new.
Sure.
So
it's great when it works.
I think we just have some integration to go look and see what's going on.
Cool. I mean, because essentially the difference that I'm looking at, what I'd like to have it do is just be able to, other services can push into the website, can push into Blazor, instead of Blazor always having to pull.
Yeah, which makes sense. I just confirmed that my hunch around that little checkbox button is the opt-in to start using startup services XML by default. And if it's not enabled, it usually means that the SDK is mismatched. So like there's something separate from the tools that VS ships, which is the Service Fabric SDK. I would say make sure that the SDK, the latest, is installed, and if it's still not lit up for a new project, then let us know.
Can do.
I guess, sorry, I just hopped on, but I've got a question for a support ticket that we've opened up. We're just starting to see we have like a 5-node production cluster running. We started seeing some warning states on the image store service. And so when I restarted a node that was down, and then that resolved it for the image store service, but then that node went down for the backup restore service. So just having trouble finding out kind of what the root cause might be. Trying to figure out how to get at some more helpful logs, since I'm not seeing any health report events that would lead me to be able to know kind of what might be some of the root causes.
I would look also in the events tab to see if there's any correlated things that are going on. If there's nothing in events and there's no health report, there's got to be a health report if the thing is down. I would expect there at least to be something in error saying, hey, this thing is below target.
Exactly. So we're getting that multiple failures during open.
Okay. If you're seeing those failures during open, then usually there's an error code or an exception stack that is included in that health report. It just might be getting truncated. If you look in the details tab, usually you can get more information about, there's a little bit more, it doesn't get truncated as soon, just a visual thing. So if you're seeing, an error in open, then that's a pretty good indicator that there's something wrong with the actual service. And whatever that error is, that will be instructive. And if it's not obvious from whatever that is, you can always open a ticket. I think you said you already have one.
Okay.
But that should be, we should be able to get it from there.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions?
If there's no questions, we're going to make Mike talk about managed clusters some more.
All right. Well, if the team wants it, we can give back everyone 13 minutes before next calls, I'm sure. And I'll have this recording available in the ACP as soon as it's available to me in stream. And then I believe we also post this in YouTube, so I'll get that uploaded as well. Any final words from the team or any final questions?
I think I'll mention, since the startup services thing is new. First of all, I found the doc off the top of my head, so luckily I'll put that in the chat. For those who haven't been tracking this work, to make local development easier, Service Fabric a long time ago invented this notion of default services, which are services that get created automatically when the application gets deployed. But they've always been a little weird, because frequently that's not what you want to have happen in production environments. It's also, default services were also weird because if you ever wanted to change anything about the services, say you wanted to change you had a stateless service and you wanted to change the instance count, for example. you had to go through this convoluted process of changing cluster config to enable default services to be upgraded, and then you do a application upgrade, but it's not an application upgrade that contains any bits. It's just this config change. And it rolls through the cluster, not really doing anything, and then changes the service instance configuration at the end. There's a complicated flowchart if you go look up upgrades and default services. It's really complicated to figure out what's actually happening and when. They were always sort of a little artificial. And so what we've been working on with the VS Tools folks for a long time is to come up with a different way whereby if you're doing sort of local deployment, you still get that sort of F5 experience where services just start, but they're not included in this application manifest place. Now you can always, default services remain a feature, right? We're not taking them away, although I have my misgivings about them. But we do think that overall, this is a better pattern where the, Visual Studio F5 magic still works, but you don't have this service instance level information floating around in your application types and don't have to deal with that strange upgrade process to change things. So you get a much more quote unquote normal service fabric experience. It doesn't feel normal because you've always had these default services, but as far as the runtime actually works, you have a very segmented model between application instances and service instances. So anyway, the startup services are sort of the new way of getting that experience through Visual Studio. And we think overall it will remove a source of confusion and errors, frankly, that we see a lot related to default services over time as people pick it up and start using it. So anyway, that's that. Do check it out. I think, it's a new thing, so we're always interested in feedback. If people give it a shot and have, preferences or information about it that you want to share, feedback, I think we'd always love to hear more. And I see that I managed to talk long enough that we got more questions. So good. Sorry, everyone.
I'll jump in with another question real fast then. Kind of following up on that thread we had going back and forth. With there being, with the suggestion that we should not be using service templates and we shouldn't be using, of course, you don't necessarily want to be using default services, and as you just described, and the difficulty of describing the parameters that should be deployed for a given service. I guess, is that something that is actively being tackled, or is it just kind of being left as it's painful and here's some workarounds for it?
So I think if I can, and we've chatted about this a little bit separately, what you're really sort of looking for is a declarative service definition.
Yeah, especially that can tap into the configuration overrides.
Right. So that's another confusing thing, perhaps, about Service Fabric is that that config, it has never been per service instance. If you create two services of the same type, let's say you had a queue and you're going to use it as an inbox and an outbox, and there's some processor in the middle. So you'd have two queue services, two instances of the same queue service, inbox and outbox. There has never been in the Service Fabric runtime an ability to pass different parameters to those two services independently. If you do some config upgrade on the application, they're going to see the same values, at least by default, right? You can go do a whole bunch of tricky things inside of config to say maybe have config with somebody's name or something like that. So there's ways to do it, but it's very manual. So that's something that the Service Fabric runtime has never had, really. So regardless of what we're talking about with a declarative service instance today, it won't be able to tap into those independent, you won't be able to pass independent config to those things. If you do some application parameter upgrade, it's going to be seen by everything. So I just want to be clear that that's not something that's coming, because it really doesn't exist today.
No, for sure. But
yeah.
I guess, if we need to put something custom on a per service thing, we put that in. I forget where that is. Is there like a naming service or something? Something has like a key value pair that you can just kind of attach to the services and look it up.
Technically possible. Again, we don't tend to like seeing the naming store used that way, because it naming and address resolution are like the super hot path in case anything fails or you're doing upgrades and things are moving around. That address store is pretty important, and if people have crammed tons of these random key value properties in there, then we have seen repeated cases of people overwhelming that store, and then your address resolutions don't work, which means failovers don't work.
Sure.
And a whole bunch of other things kind of fall apart. So what we tend to see people do, if you end up with a lot of this sort of per service customization, either people do complicated things in the config packages, which will work fine, or people deploy some other key value config management service into the cluster and have the services hit that rather than hitting naming. At low scale, it's probably not a problem, but low scale eventually turns into high scale, and then people run into stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to the question around declarative service declaration definitions, the new startup services are actually the first swing at that. So I think there's an understanding that, yeah, for local development, you sort of want this declarative thing, and then you can easily change it and hit F5 and things sort of work. In Azure, for real production environments, you can already define individual services via ARM. And so we kind of direct people to using the ARM definitions of your applications and services as a way to get the declarative service definitions. If your clusters are not in Azure, if they're standalone or something, currently there's not anything magic or really a lot to help. The startup services are really your best bet. Or there's the general pattern is, since the runtime does not have a declarative service model, people just do it imperatively. And so there's some step of your CI/CD process where you turn it over to PowerShell, and in PowerShell you call the create service APIs to create stuff, and handle the fact that most of the time you don't need to create services because they're already created, and this is just an upgrade.
Sure.
So it really segments those two things apart. I think we do want to get to a generic declarative service model. There was some discussion when we were building startup services about using ARM itself as the same definition language. But that did not, for design reasons, end up that way. And so today you're going to have startup services.xml for local development, and then some other declarative thing, usually ARM, for clusters in Azure.
Okay. And just please just keep the PowerShell and Fabric client routes open too.
Oh yeah. Those have to live, because there are teams that do dynamic service creation, where some call comes in to one service and it uses the client APIs to new applications or services on the fly.
Oh yeah, we do that.
Yeah. So those imperative ones are never going to go away, because they're the core that underneath all of this is what's really happening. But for simplicity's sake, and for fundamentally in a lot of environments, you want an artifact. You want something that is checked in, that is audited, that tells you what the description of the environment is. And so trying to get to a more declarative service model is something that we're interested in doing. But today, ARM checks most of those boxes for folks in Azure. If you're not in Azure, then I think we have some more work to do.
Cool, thanks.
Sorry, just one more question on that. Is there a path to get from default services to managed services? What does that look like?
Yeah, if you look up ARM-defined service fabric applications, there's a whole sort of process where ARM can take over the service definition management. And so there's some guides in there around how to perform that sort of takeover, at which point there's also a process for removing default services. Fundamentally, default services are they're just a little strange. The real knowledge about what the service definition is after the service is created lives in the runtime. It doesn't really live in the application manifest. And so if you have default service upgrade off, for example, and there's a process, don't do it just this simply, and do try it first, but you basically just delete the definitions in the application manifest. And since the runtime is what really is tracking the definition of that service, nothing happens. So there is a process. It's sort of twofold. There is getting the services to be declared in ARM, and then getting them out of your application manifest. And there are procedures for both of those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see Andy's error. That is a cool one. I haven't seen not a valid Win32 file time in a while. So I think the ticket, we'll have to go and check to see what's going on there. Is that cluster a local development cluster, or is that in Azure somewhere?
That's on Azure DoD.
Okay, interesting. We'll figure it out.
Appreciate it.
We're about out of time. Were there any other last questions that we need to deal with?
Don't think so. I've been answering in chat.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
good job, Mike. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Covering me while I monologue.
Important monologue though.
Okay.
Big change. Cool.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for your time. We look forward to seeing you next month. I believe that is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, July 15th, and we'll get something formal posted in the community once we have that locked down. Thank you again, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Steph. Thanks, everybody.